first time I've been in in Turkmenistan.
Yes.
This is the first time I've been in Central Asia.
So you have already met Turkmen businessmen, right? So what can you tell about our youth, about our businessmen?
I consider that a win in my world when only one student falls asleep out of 300.
What have you heard about Turkmenistan?
I read a book on Central Asia. I think it's a much more vibrant society and a much more vibrant economy. One characteristic is, of course, optimism.
Now I want you to name, let's say again, three best businessmen of all time.
Microsoft would have been a better company had Mr. Gates finished school. The Windows would have been less buggy. Just a thought.
What quality do you value most?
I'll mention a couple. First of all, I believe I am in this role, which is exactly where I'm supposed to be and doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. If I had to live in another city, I would take a very hard look at Ashgabat.
Здравствуйте, друзья! Меня зовут Азат. Сегодня мы общаемся с гостем из Соединенных Штатов, с профессором, с доктором бизнес-наук, с преподавателем бизнес-администрирования в университете штата Иллинойс, господин Стивен Майкл. Mr. Michael?
Здравствуйте, salam. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome to Turkmenistan.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
Thank you. Professor, how your trip is going on? How do you like Turkmenistan? This is first time you are in
It's the
this
first
country.
time I've been in Turkmenistan.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've been in Central Asia. I'm having a fabulous time. I'm here as a guest of the ambassador and under the auspices of the Department of State of the United States. I'm here to help build friendship, community, and entrepreneurial intentions, entrepreneurial innovation here in Turkmenistan, and try to help whatever way I can. The people here have been fabulous, they've been charming, and the food has been delicious. So I've had a great time so far.
So you have already met Turkmen businessmen, right?
I've
had
met some
meetings?
Turkmen businessmen. I have met many Turkmen students. I've lectured at a couple different universities at this point. I have also, as you said, met with a few businessmen.
So
And
what-
I met with a lot of high school students.
So what can you tell about our youth, about our businessmen?
I think there's a bright future here from the students I've seen. I will say, when I have given lecture, they have been involved, they have been engaged, they've asked good questions, and they have shown bright eyes, and only one kid fell asleep. I consider that a win in my world when only one student falls asleep out of 300.
So what was the best question you liked more than others?
Well, the question that my dean will be most excited about is when the student asked, do you accept students from Turkmenistan to your University of Illinois?
So
And my answer to that is a resounding yes. We'd love to see your application.
Okay. What have you heard about Turkmenistan before? I think you must have Googled something about this country before coming, and was there any difference between what you have heard before and what you have seen here when you came here?
I read several articles. I read a book on Central Asia, and I've had some reading about the old Soviet Union, so I understand something of that legacy that belongs to Turkmenistan. I think it's a much more vibrant society and a much more vibrant economy than the books seem to transmit. There's a lot more things going on. There's a lot more people going on. We're doing interesting things. That's what I've seen with the students. That's what I've seen here, even in the shopping mall where we're having coffee.
So let's go to your profession, to your job that you are doing more than 30 years, yes? You are teaching business.
Yes, I have been doing that for 30 years.
We all know that education in USA, it's one of the best in the world, including higher education.
Thank you for the compliment.
Can you please tell your opinion? What makes education system in US one of the best in the world? What's the difference between US education system with the rest of the world?
I think we have three strengths that are worth highlighting for our conversation. One strength is that we have a vigorous, competitive environment for students and for resources. So my university is the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. It's the leading university in my state. We have 50 states. So students have, in theory, 50 state universities to choose from. We have even more private universities, and we also have additional state universities. So competition for those students tends to make us all a little bit better. We have rigorous standards for our faculty, and we try very hard to ensure that we make our faculty compete for the right and the privilege to hold the professorships that we have. Indeed, many are unsuccessful in that effort, and I'm fortunate enough to have risen to the highest rank of the university's professorate. I say the third thing is that we're actively engaged with our business community, actively engaged with our engineering and scientific community, and my colleagues in other parts of the university would say we're actively engaged in our social organizations. To name one example, my university has a set of entrepreneurial coaches called EntreCore, and they're designed to bring business skills to small business people. That's from my College of Business. And the goal is to help take some small businessmen some of whom are very sophisticated people, but they lack a basic business training or a basic business skill, and we bring in some accounting skills, some marketing skills to help them stabilize, or in some cases professionalize, their business a little bit. So that's one example. Another example is the program in which I teach, which is called the HEFT Technology and Management Program. HEFT is the name of a family, Mr. and Mrs. Leonard Heft, who donated money to the program. The Technology and Management Program trains leaders for the innovation economy. We take approximately 30 engineers, we take 30 business students, and we bring them together for common coursework in innovation and management, in coursework for the other disciplines. So the business students wire a circuit board, and the engineers have to make the books balance. And we do projects for companies, and indeed we have industrial sponsors for those companies, including John Deere, Caterpillar, BP, and some others. So those companies keep us fresh. Those companies bring us real world problems, and therefore our students are prepared for the real world when they go out there for the market economy to try to succeed.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk about another program about MBA. It's also getting quite popular between our businessmen here. Can you say a few words about MBA programs? And do you think that every businessman have to study an MBA program? Do you recommend it for? You are teaching MBA
I have taught MBA programs, and I have taught MBAs many times. There's a few points to consider about that. One point is that the MBA is a very accessible degree. Indeed, my College of Business offers an online MBA called the IMBA, where all of the coursework is online, and there's a trip typically once a year to Champaign. I personally like the face-to-face encounter, but I should mention for your audience that we do have these online capabilities. The MBA is extremely useful for a set of skills that make you effective in organizations. And that's a presumption of the MBA, that there is in fact an existing organization in which some amount of specialization is rewarded, in which some amount of focus is rewarded. Entrepreneurs are generalists. They have to be. So as entrepreneurs pursue their work, An MBA is a little less effective because entrepreneurs have to reach outside the organization a lot more than inside the organization. Indeed, they have to create the inside of the organization. So an MBA is desirable, but for entrepreneurs or for people who are starting businesses or building things up from the bottom, it's not necessarily required in quite the way it is sometimes in large organizations. Now, I might mention that's an observation from the US. I'm not familiar with the Turkmen economy as well, or the Turkmen employment situation, so I'll have to modify my comments as you inform me more.
Let's talk about entrepreneurs that you mentioned. What's the difference, do you think, in your opinion, difference between entrepreneur, a businessman, and a manager?
Entrepreneurs pursue opportunities regardless of the resources available to them. Managers ask for the resources before they pursue the opportunities.
Great answer.
The entrepreneur has to mobilize all those resources, whether it's, of course, financial resources or money, right? But they also have to mobilize suppliers. They have to mobilize employees, and in some cases, or contract employee or contract workers, people who will work with them. So they have to reach out all the time. So they have to find the resources and put it together. On the other hand, any manager typically negotiates a nice package, and I don't mean salary. I mean negotiates how many people will work for him and what his budgets will be. Does all those things before he takes the job.
Yeah, I see. So what are the three main qualities of an entrepreneur that every entrepreneur must have?
Three. We'll go to three. We'll see how it works. Okay. Well, one characteristic is, of course, optimism and a certain degree of confidence. No one is going to invest in you unless you look like a person who's invested in himself. So, confidence, purpose, vision. What Steve Jobs used to call the ability to create a reality distortion field, right? To create a certain capability, a sense that this dream, this vision could be realized, right? So that you have to have that vision, you have to be able to create that vision in the minds of other people. That's a kind of leadership, really. The ability to create a vision and have other people enlist, if you will, in that vision. So I'd say that's a piece of it. I'd say a second piece of it is that you have to be a generalist and willing to be a generalist. Every entrepreneur has a story of the day when the orders came in. There were thousands of orders. They came in. It was a great day, and everyone, from the CEO on down, was packing boxes. Everybody in the CEO on down was answering phones, checking email, looking for orders. You have to be a generalist. You have to be willing to supervise everything because you are, after all, inventing a new organization. You have to think about some of the things the big company never thinks about. Who's going to clean the restroom? If the restroom isn't cleaned on a regular basis, that's a big downer. That's a downer for employees, a downer for customers. But the typical corporation has thought that through 19 ways from Sunday. You, on the other hand, have to invent that routine and 1,000 others. The cash routines, how you're going to handle cash, et cetera, et cetera. The third piece was a lesson I learned from Jimmy John Leotode. Jimmy John's is the most popular, fast-growing sandwich shop in America. They make the submarine sandwich. And he said he opened his first shop, and the best decision he ever made was to run his business out of his checkbook because he always knew exactly how much money he had. Because why do businesses fail? They run out of cash. The day comes when somebody has to be paid, a supplier has to be paid, employees expect paychecks, and if the money isn't there, people walk, the business falls apart. Being able to carefully manage cash flow, because it's not about whether you've got a great idea, all that's not going to see you through that Friday when you can't pay the bills. So I would point to that. I'd also, I guess, finally point out the fact that the entrepreneur has to set a vision keep to the vision, hire to the vision, and manage the culture of the organization. There's some things you can't delegate, and one of those is managing culture. To name one example, of John Peterman of the J. Peterman Company describes how for the first few years of his organization, the first few years of his company, he had breakfast with every employee at one time or another during their first few months on the job. That's transmitting a culture. That's transmitting a culture. You can't delegate that away, and in fact, when he broke from that habit is when his organization started to have problems.
Okay. Now I want you to name, let's say again, 3 best businessmen of all time. You have mentioned Steve Jobs. Do you think he's one of the best businessmen of, let's say, 20th century?
Yes, I do. Let me point out that Steve Jobs created a couple of different industries. Right? First of all, he created the personal computer with Mr. Wozniak. Right? He also created the digital music industry. And how did he create the digital music industry? He didn't create music, he didn't create digital music. He created a way that the creators could make money from digital music by assuring them that their rights would be respected and that they would receive some sort of revenue or royalty stream from their work. So in that sense, he created that industry as well. And the third industry he created was the iPad, or the tablet computer, which was again something no one else had introduced at that time. And indeed now we have lots and lots of people with lots and lots of tablet computers in all kinds of places. So let's look at Steve Jobs as one such achiever. We could put in the same kind of a category, we could look at Walt Disney. Right? Walt Disney also created not one but 2 industries. One was the feature-length cartoon movie. Now there had been cartoons, and they were usually shown before actual movies, but it was his vision that created the entire full-length feature movie. And by doing so, right, he opened up an entire entertainment venue that had never been exploited before. In addition, he created the theme park. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of going to Disney World or Disneyland.
Not yet.
No? But in Disney World or Disneyland, there's a set of rides that were created by Walt Disney. Every ride has a theme, every ride tells a story. There's something about the ride that carries you through the ride intellectually, emotionally, as well as mechanically. There have been amusement parks where there was a machine that carried you around, but there wasn't anything that engaged your mind and your heart the way the Disney rides did. So he created the theme park, and indeed, every theme park that's been created after that has tried to copy that same storytelling idea. In the United States, Universal Studios is the one that's had the most success competing with Disney for these thousands and thousands of tourist dollars. Okay? So I would submit that Mr. Disney would also be a leading candidate.
Who else? Elon, no? Mr. Musk.
I think, to be fair to Mr. Musk, the jury is still out, right? And the jury is still out on whether the Tesla is going to be a good business. The company itself has found out that it's very hard to mass manufacture automobiles. It's a difficult task, right? So I would say that that's been a real challenge. So when he's successfully produced lots and lots of cars that are actually being driven, and there's some set of charging stations to go with them, I would say he's been a success. But the jury is still out. One can only applaud his ambition and his vision and his optimism. So I would say that all of those are there. As we think about other great entrepreneurs, I guess one person, I've gone blank on the name, but the fellow who invented fracking, which was the combination of horizontal drilling and flushing water into the well, right? Fracking's changed our world. Right? It's changed the geopolitics of the world. It's changed the energy resources of the world. It's made, that's a huge invention and a huge innovation. And in fact, it was a technique He didn't start a company, right? So it percolated out from his organization to many others. If we were looking at other entrepreneurs to look at, we could probably put Robert Noyce into that group. Robert Noyce is the founder of Intel. We could probably lump in Andy Grove with him. So those are the men who both had the capability to design the semiconductor chip and then build an organization around the development of semiconductors, and indeed the invention of the microprocessor, which was done by Texas Instruments and by Noyce, basically changed our world by giving us all the digital products that we have today, one of which is right there, filming us today. Those are three that come quickly to mind.
Okay, thank you. Let's again get back to these guys. We all know that there are very, very successful businessmen like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates also, that they have never graduated from university. And in between young people, there is a myth that it's not so important to have higher education, to graduate university, to become a successful businessman, successful entrepreneur. So what do you think about this? Do you think education is very important to become a successful businessman, or no?
Education, and college education in particular, is designed to give you, ideally, a set of frameworks, tools, and models to look at the world. A truly creative person has a tremendous store of raw information and has the ability to combine those in useful and novel ways. So if that's the case, then the more education you have, that gives you both more raw information and an ability to combine it. Indeed, education helps to deal with change. We know from academic research that farmers in India were among the world's leaders in adopting hybrid and seed technologies. Why? Because they were better educated, and they were able to implement hybrid corn and the appropriate treatments that were necessary to raise crops. They were more effective at it than people who were uneducated or less educated, excuse me. If IBM offered me the chance to write an operating system for a personal computer in 6 months, I'd have dropped out of school too. I commend Mr. Gates for his ability to seize the moment.
Yeah.
That's an entrepreneurial skill. That's an extraordinarily powerful entrepreneurial skill. So all honor to Mr. Gates for having seen that and seized that. I might have dropped out of Harvard too if the opportunity presented, or maybe I wouldn't, in which case I wouldn't be rich. Right? But I think that education on the whole helps people to deal with change and to perceive opportunity. Now, it is worth saying that many people see ideas, and we hear about the successes, we don't hear about the failures. I've always urged students to finish their education no matter how good their business idea is, and indeed, perhaps Microsoft would have been a better company had Mr. Gates finished school. The Windows would have been less buggy. Just a thought.
Okay. What about you? Do you own a business right now?
I rent property, but I put out it's a full-time job to be a college professor.
So what's the reason you have chosen the way teach business but not drive it? You are master of business knowledge. Why you are not driving your huge business? You are teaching.
I want to make other people successful. I would rather make other people successful and find meaning in their work and make their innovations and ideas come into reality than just work on only my own. Indeed, I have more fun dabbling in other people's businesses and enterprises and innovations. In a sense, I get to participate with a lot of people doing a lot of things, which is more fun than for me personally. I should also mention that, again, to be a college professor requires a fair amount of work that is not in the venture startup category. It requires writing, it requires study, it requires learning, it requires production of intellectual products. Professors are a kind of entrepreneur. Right? We're entrepreneurs of ideas. Right, so we're out here selling our ideas. We're out here trying, and so in that sense, I am an entrepreneur.
So you have never had any regrets that if only 30 years ago I started my own business? No?
I have no regrets at all. I have the best life I could ever have imagined.
Perfect.
The thought that I could come at 60 years old after 30 years of teaching and have the great privilege of being in Turkmenistan to meet all these great people and to talk about all these interesting ideas is just magical to me. I have, and I've traveled elsewhere. I've given lectures in other parts of the world. On a daily basis, I deal with really interesting people, my students, and my alumni who are in touch with me on a regular basis.
Okay. A few minutes ago, we were talking about books, and I've told you that we'll get back to this question.
Sure.
I want you to give recommendations. What kind of books, which books, exact books to read for our young startuppers, entrepreneurs. 3 or 5 books that you have to read.
One book that I have used as a textbook that has the great virtue of covering a lot of different topics in the same book is called The Entrepreneur's Toolkit. It is written as part of the Harvard Business Review's Essentials series. So this gives you a sense of the unity of the venture. As we said, with an entrepreneur, you have to create lots of things from scratch. You're the one creating an accounting system. You're the one creating a marketing plan. You're the one creating the technology and the actual product that's being developed, right? So this book gives you a window into a lot of different things you have to do. So that's one that I would recommend as a basic kind of a textbook. Right? A second one that I would recommend was written by the grand old man of management, Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker has a book called Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And the book talks about lots of different approaches, lots of different strategies as to how one can lever into a marketplace. So he talks, for example, about the value of using a phrase from American General, hit them where they ain't. He talks about the strategy of the idea that you can actually come up with something that replaces an existing product, but that isn't the same as the existing product, and therefore prevents them from retaliating against you. Another concept he presents in that book is managing to the critical niche, finding a niche and then filling it completely. That's something that entrepreneurs in some areas have to learn to appreciate, that we can in fact try to fill an entire niche. The example he gives is fascinating. He talks about an enzyme that is used when engaging in cataract surgery. Cataracts are something that most older people suffer from. In my country, eye doctors performed the surgery, and there was a moment in the surgery where they had to use a knife, and if their hand slipped, the person was blind. They developed an enzyme, a company developed an enzyme that would in fact dissolve that ligament rather than cut it. Notice how much risk that takes out for the surgeon and risk for the patient. But for the surgeon, and therefore he's very happy to pay for it. Once you have seized that opportunity, once you're proven yourself as the one enzyme that can dissolve the ligament, there's no need for another one. They produced it, they sold it all over the country for many, many years, until I might mention that new techniques have made that unnecessary. But that's an example that Drucker talks about at some length. He also points out in there some of the links between entrepreneurship inside companies and entrepreneurship outside companies. So he brings a good philosophy to it as well. A third book that is very popular and is used in a lot of places is called The Lean Startup. And The Lean Startup has a almost scientific approach to entrepreneurship. It points out that a venture is really a kind of social reality test. You bring to the marketplace this idea, which you convert into some sort of a product. You think or you hypothesize that product will meet customers' needs. You hypothesize that the customer will pay a price that will cover your costs. How do you prove that hypothesis? You introduce the venture. That kind of thinking is in fact in fact true, and it's a valuable way of thinking, because then you can ask yourself the subsidiary questions. What hypotheses have to be true for my venture to be successful? What has to be true about the cost structure? What has to be true about price? What has to be true about the fit between the product and the customer, or the product and the customer's needs? So that framework of thinking through the issue is valuable. Finally, there's a book I would recommend to any entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur or any human being. And that is the 10% Entrepreneur. This is a person who takes an ingenious approach, who's McGinnis, I believe is the name. He takes the ingenious approach of asking, do you have to start a company or be a corporate employee, or can you be involved in some way in an intermediate stage? Can you put 10% of your time into entrepreneurial ventures? And he offers a lot of frameworks by which you can do that. He talks about the idea of offering angel investing, which many people do, including myself. He talks about the idea of simply offering goods and services as a promoter to young companies, to either for some small share of the equity. He talks about different kinds of involvement that you can have, short of quitting your day job, renting space, forming an organization, and then trying to make a product. That's admirable. That's something we should in fact encourage, but it's not the only thing.
Okay, let's go on with recommendations and finalize our official part of our interview. Many startuppers or young entrepreneurs make different kind of mistakes, and because of what, in year or two business closes. And can you please give a few recommendations, advices for young entrepreneurs, most popular mistakes that they won't do?
We'll talk about some financial risks, and we'll talk about some market risks. So some financial risks, we've already mentioned one of them, right? One has to manage cash flow very closely. There's a practical implication for this, and that is you never buy what you can rent, and you never rent what you can borrow. Right? In other words, you want to try to keep your cash needs low. Let's say you think you need a delivery vehicle. In the United States, you could buy that vehicle, or you could lease it, or rent, all right? So, or maybe you borrow it from a friend. Right? Or family, right? So so those are three possibilities. Which one costs you the most? You buy the van, you hold on to the van, you have to make it work, you have to keep it running, and it's very expensive, right? You lease it, you only have a certain payment per month, the risk is lower. You borrow it, the risk is much, much lower. So I would say keep your cash needs low. Okay? Watch the checkbook, as Jimmy John already advised. Okay? Don't be willing to accept positive and negative feedback. How can you learn? Entrepreneurs rarely get it right on the first try. They say they rarely get the product exactly right and the product market fit, because remember that entrepreneurs are successful when the product meets the need of the customer. And you have a lot of ideas as to why that might work, but ultimately they're just ideas. So how can you see whether there's a fit? You want to be observing that fit, see whether it works, right? And be ready to learn, be ready to adapt, be ready to change in order to keep the business open. Finally, I would say don't try to do everything yourself. You want to try to recruit a team internally to organizationally, that's one part of it. But another part of it is to recruit people outside, partners who can work for you and work with you. As an example, you don't want to have to create everything about an organization, everything about a marketing plan, everything about an accounting system. The extent to which you can purchase some of those things from the marketplace or borrow those services from other people, the more likely you are to get them to keep your own cash needs low and to get successful operations of those skills. So those are some operational and business type tips. I should also mention that legal incorporation matters a lot. That does differ from country to country. I wouldn't know the regulations here, but making sure that you have the proper legal form of organization that will allow your business to work for today and tomorrow.
Great. The official part of our interview is finished now, and I'll have 5 more minutes of yours, and we have 13 personal questions, short questions that require short answers.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm a professor. I don't give short answers.
What quality do you value most in people?
I'll mention a couple, right? Because
can.
for most people, integrity, I value people to be integrity and to be honest. That's an obvious one, okay? What I think is a little less obvious is something I personally value is intellectual curiosity. People who are curious about the world, people who are curious about why things are as they are, curious about and most of all, curious about other people. So I'm looking for, when I pick students for things, I tend to try to see, are people interested, genuinely interested at an intellectual level in the things that we talk about.
Your favorite hobby?
I'm a father of 4 daughters, so my favorite hobby was helping to raise my children.
4 daughters, no son?
No sons, just 4 daughters. Son-in-law maybe, none on the horizon. We'll see.
The main.
I do run for exercise. I read a lot of all kinds of things.
Okay. The main positive trait of your character.
I don't. I'm delighted to hear that someone thinks I have a positive character trait. we haven't known each other all that long, and yet you still think I have a positive character. I'd like to believe I'm optimistic, and I'd like to believe I'm open to people.
What about negative one? Most negative that you don't like in you?
I can be disorganized, and I'm sometimes late.
If not a professor of business administration, then who would you like to be in this life?
First of all, I believe I am in this role, which is exactly where I'm supposed to be and doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. And I've been richly rewarded for it in intellectual ways, and I've been more than adequately compensated in financial ways. So I fell into this exactly right. If I was not here, I would be in business. I took my MBA from Kellogg, the Northwestern Business School, and I would have followed into business as so many of my friends and colleagues did, and worked in a corporation, probably in and around strategic decisions, business acquisitions, things of that nature. Now, I should mention that I got the entrepreneurial bug later in life, so if I look at that particular turning point when I was a master's student, that's what I would point to. I could also point, so leave it at that.
The best city to live outside of US?
Let me answer a question you didn't ask. I live 2.5 hours from Chicago, Illinois, which is, I think, the most livable big city in America. It's in the center of the country. It has weather extremes. It's not as nice as Los Angeles, but it's got a beautiful downtown. It sits on a lake. It has a vibrant arts community. It has a really dynamic business community. It has plenty of places to live in the city, plenty of places to live outside the city. Chicago is by far and away the best big city to live in America. If I had to live in another city, yeah, I would take a very hard look at Ashgabat. I think it's been a charming place, and I've enjoyed the people and I've enjoyed the food. So Ashgabat would get a very serious look if I was actually going to be moving outside the country.
Great. What is happiness for you in general?
Happiness is seeing other people succeed. And I would extend that to include my family and my children. I would point out that, of course, I enjoy the love of my family and the love of my wife as much or more than anyone else does. I am blessed beyond measure to have a loving wife and four lovely daughters who are all healthy and relatively successful. If we ask the broader question, what's happiness, I'd have to say that I have tried to make students successful, my children successful. My wife has made me successful. So I would say that happiness is watching other people succeed.
Then what's the greatest misfortune for you?
My house burned down 4 years ago, burned to the ground. It happened on Easter Sunday, 2015. And I stood outside the house and watched it burn to the ground. Now it was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No one was hurt. We got the dogs out as well as the children. So no one was hurt, but we lost everything we owned. Now that sounds horrible. Let me tell you it wasn't horrible. It was an inconvenience at worst, and it was an opportunity to see the good in lots and lots of people. My neighbor, Hussein Leblebici, who is Turkish, he came down, and my wife had taken my children away from the home, because they didn't want to watch this, obviously. I stayed because I had some responsibility. And he came up to me and he patted me on the shoulder and he said, "You will come live at our house."
Wow.
I said, no. There's at the time, my oldest daughter was at college. There would have been 5 people in Hussein's house. And I said, "There's too many of us." He said, "No, I insist." And his wife, Ruth, was right behind him and she said, "Absolutely, please come down." So for 2 weeks we lived with the Leblebicis down the street. In that time, we were fed by dozens of people. I received financial contributions from my colleagues and from my students. My students sent me money. My alumni students sent me money. So I didn't actually, the money was helpful, right? It wasn't necessary exactly, because after all, I had insurance. At some point the house was going to be rebuilt, and the house was rebuilt. But I saw a lot of people show a lot of love to Steve Michael and to the Michael family, and that was the most amazing thing in my life. So even out of what looks like a tragedy, I had great joy. And I take great joy, and the memory brings back joy to me today.
I hope that it was the first and the last time.
That's true. We definitely made sure when we rebuilt the house that we had a lot more fire insulation installed.
Right. What do you hate the most in life?
I'd like to believe I don't spend a lot of time hating. I can't say that that's always true, but I'd like to believe I don't spend a lot of time hating. I dislike when people in my business and education put students anywhere other than first. I think my whole purpose in life is to create some knowledge through my research and books and activities, and to transmit that knowledge to students, and by extension, by my students here in Turkmenistan. So people who don't put the students first get me very angry, and lots of people don't put the students first. Sometimes people put money first or something else. But we're all about the students. My university is a public university. It is supported by the state. It does not have tremendous budget pressures. So when people make decisions that might hurt the students, I get very angry.
What ability you don't have but you would like to?
I am a monolingual dinosaur. I speak only one language. Everyone in this country speaks somewhere between 2 and 6, as far as I can tell. It is the most impressive and amazing skill to me in the world to watch each of you switching in and out of 2 languages. It's so impressive to me. I must say I'm going to redouble my efforts when I go home and think about think about working on this and removing this barrier.
What will be the second language you'll speak?
Finding local tutors in Turkmen would be pretty hard in Champaign-Urbana. I would probably pick Russian as a way to access first, the great heritage of the Russian culture and the great heritage of the Central Asian culture that has Russian as a second language. So I would say that would be the obvious choice. In my world, most students take Spanish. I have nothing against Spanish as a language. I have nothing against the Spanish-speaking world. But there are other parts of the world, right? And my students, it's hard to find ones that have taken German. I've never had one that takes Russian. And that's a shame. If I have a class of 60 people and all of them have taken Spanish, that's a mistake. I can't tell you, we need to have a little more diversity, a little more diversification in that skill, in my opinion.
True. Your favorite saying, aphorism?
My favorite saying. I have a religious one. So I'll start with a religious statement, and you can, Philippians 4:13 from the New Testament from St. Paul, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I say that with reverence, to say that God gives us all opportunities and the powers to meet those opportunities. I believe that with the bottom of my heart, and I can do it if God wants it to be done, and I won't do it otherwise. That gives me a kind of confidence when things don't quite go the way I wanted. It wasn't supposed to be. And that's the way God wanted it willed. So I would point to that one. I'll mention a business saying, which is worth considering. Customers don't buy quarter-inch drill bits; they buy quarter-inch holes. Customers don't buy 10-millimeter drill bits; they buy 10-millimeter holes. Customers don't buy technologies; customers buy solutions. Right? Don't get caught up with your technology. Don't get caught up with your product. Right? Make sure that you're meeting the actual needs of the customer, and that's what people are going to pay for.
Great. And the last question. If we imagine that you had a chance to get back to past and meet yourself, a young 20 years old boy, and you had a chance to give him one message, just one sentence, what would you say to him?
First of all, learn a foreign language earlier. So we'll add that wrinkle in there. And I think what I would have said is, don't worry, everything's going to be just fine.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. This has been a great opportunity. I appreciate the chance to meet you. I appreciate the chance to meet your readers and viewers virtually. And I wish all of you well.
С нами был профессор бизнес-администрирования из Соединенных Штатов, из университета Иллинойс, господин Стивен Майкл. Thank you, Professor.